guests today. Let me introduce our guests. I'm joined in by Retired Lieutenant General KJS Dillon, who is the former GOC at the 15th Corps of Northern Command of the Indian Army, and Mr. Sushant Sareen, who's a senior fellow at the ORF. Ross Darrell Feingold, who's a former Asia chairperson at the Republicans abroad. Many thanks to you, gentlemen, for joining in. I want to quickly bring in Lieutenant General KJS Dillon. Sir, your thoughts on this very critical meeting that's happened between Prime Minister Modi and Kai Chi, given that Siddhant just highlighted the role that Kai Chi is playing in the Chinese Communist Party and also in the Politburo Standing Committee. So what is the role and also the larger messaging behind such a meeting when you see Prime Minister meeting a very significant member of not just the CCP but also of the Politburo Standing Committee?
Thank you, Akansha. Thank you, and good afternoon to you and your fellow panelists, and of course the viewers. Mr. Kaichi is a very important person, as was highlighted by the gentleman who was giving out the details. And in China, CCP plays a major role. CCP is all in charge of everything which happens in China. So I think it's a very crucial meeting, and it's a good step to meet at multiple levels and meet at multiple prongs, so that our point of view, our concerns are raised in a most meticulous manner. So I think this is a very good move, and there will be some other meetings also which will be taking place on the sides, which will be crucial. But this one particularly, since I know the hierarchy of Chinese, it's a very, very crucial meeting, and I think we have met the right person whose voice counts in the Chinese CCP and also the Politburo. So a very important meeting, and I think a good one.
I want to quickly bring in Sushant Sareen on that note. Sushant, news has in fact trickled in just days ago that Xi Jinping also unleashed China's biggest purge of its military leaders since the time of Mao. So given, the current political scenario for Xi Jinping in China as well, how significant is it for Prime Minister Modi to have had the meeting with Kai Chi?
Look, I think we've been hearing obituaries of Xi Jinping for a very long time. And I think we should desist from any speculation on what his political position is. He seems to have all his angles covered. And in countries like China, given the kind of system there is, when the fall comes, it comes pretty swiftly. So, and I don't think any purpose will be really served by speculating whether he's in command or there is other pressures working on him. And I think I think what we are doing is we are playing with a pretty straight bat right now. Yes, it is important to talk to people who have Xi Jinping's ear, because it's important, to apprise them and have try and create some kind of a consensus within the Chinese power hierarchy on how relations between India and China need to or where they need to go from here on. Now, to my mind, I think the mother of all problems between India and China is going to be the boundary question. We have tried to paper it over. We've tried to, gloss it over. We've tried to have various kinds of management of this problem, some kind of mechanisms along the border. General Dillon knows about it much better than any of us. But clearly that hasn't worked. Clearly, that has continued to be observed in its violation rather than in its observation. So I think we need to start moving towards some kind of a settlement of the border question. Now, what that is going to be, I don't know. I think the Indian side, since Modi came into power in 2014, has tried to try to move this thing forward by saying, okay, let's at least clarify where the LSE runs. What are your perceptions, or where are you on the LSE and where are we on the LSE? At least let's have that line defined. The Chinese have balled even at that. Now, until and unless we can solve this, I don't see how much we can go further. Even so, there is a kind of a rebalancing taking place because global system is in a major flux. The Americans are running amok. They have alienated every single one of their allies, every single one of their partners, whether it's Canada, whether it's the Europeans. It's like a bull in a china shop approach which they are following. Now, a lot of what the Americans have been saying, or the Trump administration has been saying, might have some degree of validity, in terms of NATO raising up or pulling its own weight insofar as funding for NATO is concerned. A lot of it has its own value. But it's also a question of how you do it.
Absolutely, and it's also the geopolitical timing of it, given the backdrop of this entire SCO meeting. The relevance of SCO as a grouping itself is being questioned. But going to deep dive into that aspect as well, I can see Rahul also has some inputs to share with us. Rahul, go ahead, please share. What are you learning about the latest meeting that's taken place between Kaichi and Prime Minister Modi? Is it anything that you're learning that you can make us aware of?
Look, I completely agree with what Sushant Sareen is saying. He's a realist, and I think he's got a very clear eye when it comes to the situation with regards to the two countries. There is no doubt that the elephant in the room is the boundary question, and I wouldn't read too much into the meeting with the principal of the Politburo, because there is an immediate necessity for India to engage at all levels, actually, of the Chinese establishment. And what is the harm in meeting other officials who, as Sushant Sareen has said very clearly, have President Xi's ear, because it helps us also to formalize equations at different levels of the hierarchy. China remains a very hierarchical country in that sense, and I was speaking to a large number of Chinese analysts who also gave me this news about this meeting and talked about the fact that he wasn't alone. There were 2 or 3 other officials who were also calling on the Prime Minister. So fundamentally, I think the Indians have realized that, look, they need to engage China at different levels to ensure that there is a common understanding of the expectations that even China has, really, of New Delhi. Look, the fact is that we can analyze the conversation between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping, but if the needle doesn't move forward in the term of outcomes, this is just another conversation. Which conversation between these two principals hasn't ended in highfalutin language which is highly optimistic and charged with optimism, in the sense that there is this sort of emphasis on normalcy and normalizing relations, but within a few years we've had a dissipation of that goodwill. And this is not the first time that Prime Minister is reaching out to Xi Jinping. This is his third actual conversation with him after a dip or an ebb in the relationship. It began in 2014 with important outreach from the Prime Minister's side, and there was, of course, a few years of an uptick where we saw trade intensifying, but that didn't change China's approach to India as far as security issues or territorial issues are concerned. In fact, if anything, we had another face-off, another standoff. Again, ties dipped. Again, of course, we had another attempt at rapprochement, or call it what you want to. And then, of course, you had Galwan, and now, of course, after 7 years, the Prime Minister traveling to China to hold that bilateral engagement. Okay. So before we sort of jump to conclusions by suggesting this is a return to normalcy or even a reset, I think we just have to look at the two declarations that are going to come out, and we're going to have to look at those readouts very, very closely to see exactly where the points of convergence are and what are the outcomes. Because I've been told that this time the conversation that was being led by the Indian side was deterministic, as if they said that, look, there's no point in having these conversations without having outcomes. So let's talk in terms more concrete terms. So we'll have to look at those readouts, and then only then can we actually come to any
I agree
real
with you over
conclusions.
there. That
but
we
yes,
have
if
to,
you want to send a signal,
right. In terms of the signaling is what we can, in fact, discuss right now. For that, I want to quickly go across to Ross as well. Ross, one thing that has been amply established by India over here is that they are looking at a thaw of ties, perhaps not a reset, something that Rahul has also been reiterating. But what will it take for that thaw? Because India has already reached that point of 24 rounds of talks that have happened. Yes, they have yielded results, but we are still in the process of building confidence. And, as many analysts say, that trade deficit and trust deficit cannot be hyphenated. I'd like your thoughts.
One of the interesting things here is very similar to the U.S.-China relationship. the relationship between India and China now has an extraordinary and growing number of issues on the agenda, and some of these issues are extraordinarily difficult to resolve. Not just the boundary issue. Of course, there's China's support for Pakistan. The Dalai Lama and Tibetan presence in India angers China, and frankly, that issue is going to get more complex once the Dalai Lama passes away and a successor needs to be chosen. There's India's recent efforts to project its naval strength in the South China Sea, for example, by joint patrols with the Philippines, which is obviously something that angers China. India and Taiwan, I'm speaking from Taiwan. India and Taiwan's commercial ties have been growing very, very rapidly in recent years, and that's also something that China is probably not so thrilled with. And from the Indian perspective, there's the presence of Chinese businesses in India, which causes concerns, especially in the technology space. There's the sale of Chinese manufactured products into India when India would rather manufacture domestically. So the agenda keeps growing. They could have multiple rounds of discussions about the boundary issue and maybe make progress there. But there's so many other issues that frankly are going to cause tensions in the bilateral relationship, notwithstanding the nice things that have been said this weekend.
All right. I quickly want to take that forward. As far as mistrust at the boundary is concerned, Lieutenant General KJS Dillon, you're the best person to perhaps talk about why this has turned up to be a legacy issue now. And so I think Galwan was one of the friction points. We cannot forget Doklam. We cannot forget the war in 1962. So take us through how can we now build that trust again, whether it is just disengagement or are we also looking at, as many defense experts have highlighted, geotagging of various patrolling locations and perhaps expand patrolling in other sectors as well?
Kangsha, thanks a lot for asking this question, and I agree with Mr. Sreen and Rahul Shivshankar. These issues cannot be wished away over a meeting, or these issues cannot be resolved over one meeting. These are legacy issues. And all other things, flights, the yatra, the trade, everything else can keep moving, and it will keep moving. They all will come to a jinx moment. Something happens on the line of actual control or the international boundary between India and China, as we saw during Galwan. So it is most important that we identify the main issue. The main issue, as Rahul has also said, remains the boundary issue. And the only thing which you can start immediately, I don't expect the boundary issue to be settled in this SCO meeting. The only thing which you can start immediately is disengagement. Some disengagements have happened in Tenchok and Depsang.
Yes.
Disengagements and all the points of conflict, including Fingers area, Galwan area, and all along the line of actual control, and go back to a particular timeline in the history. And thereafter, start negotiating and discussions so that we reach a long-term standing solution for the boundary issue and LAC issue. And I don't see that coming during this meeting or after another 10 meetings, but we must make a beginning. And now the atmosphere is right with the Trump tariffs and other things hanging in the environment to take this forward in the most positive manner. And let me say one thing. Trust deficit you talked about, Chinese believe in something like, if we can't resolve it, let's leave it for the next generation. They will do it. So we must understand with whom we are negotiating. We must understand their psyche. They will never be in a hurry to resolve an issue unless it is resolved on their terms. So we must be very clear. We should not go to town with everything in hunky-dory and the flowery words in the declarations. But boundary issue remains the main issue. Second is the cross-border terrorism from Pakistan, for which the SCO initially started. Pakistan state-sponsored terrorism inside India, and China's active support to Pakistan during the Operation Sindoor.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. So speak to those fears, Lieutenant General Dillon, because many skeptics have in fact interrupted over there only. That's why I'm asking you, how do you speak to those fears who say that India believes in multipolarity, and so if the Chinese are selling weapons to Pakistan, what is the harm in that? Speak to those fears.
See, one thing which should be made very clear is selling Chinese weapons being used by Pakistan, or Pakistan having bought the Chinese weapons, or Chinese having sold up weapons to Pakistan is okay, because we also have bought weapons from Russia. With that chronology, we should not be sitting on the same table where Pakistan, Russia, China, India are sitting. So buying weapons from a particular country is one thing which all over the world the armies are buying, or the defense militaries are buying from each other. The point is the real-time intelligence about Indian assets being shared with Pakistan during Operation Sindoor, that's not a friendly act.
Yes.
That's an hostile act. Now, giving weapons which they have paid for, or installments or loan or whatever, that's not a big issue. Those things will only come in if we have a relationship where we are absolutely best friends. Then that country will say, okay, I will not send weapons to your enemy because we are the best friends. We have to reach that level first. But during operations, giving intelligence, sharing intelligence, and that amounts to, cooperating with the enemy against us, that's not a friendly act.
Okay.
That is where it must be starting.
All right. I'm going to, in fact, just slip into a quick break. Going to request the gentleman to continue staying with us. There's lots up for discussion. In fact, this is a bilateral that was much awaited, and we will continue with that discussion. But for now, we're slipping into a quick break. Stay tuned to Summit of the Hour.